Hey guys, tonight we step softly into a corner of history you probably haven't noticed before: the curious, almost whispered tradition of women proposing marriage in 19th century Ireland, especially on that rarest of days, leap year's February 29th. You might think marriage proposals are always the man's stage, right? Well, here the script flips quietly, like a secret waiting to be uncovered, hidden in plain sight beneath the layers of folklore and social rules. It's a paradox that almost no one talks about. Yet, once you glimpse it, you can't unsee the way Irish women use this tiny loophole to nudge their futures, to seize control in a time when choice was a luxury. This story doesn't shout, it hides, it waits, and it whispers something we may not want to remember about power, gender, and the dance between desire and duty. You probably won't survive this quiet rebellion without questioning everything you thought you knew about who asks and who says yes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time below. I love seeing where you're tuning in from as the night slips across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the damp, fog-laden fields of rural Ireland, the air thick with the scent of peat fires and wet earth. It's February, cold enough to bite your cheeks red, yet every 4 years, this particular day carries a breath of unusual promise. Leap Day, that anomalous date inserted by the calendar to keep time honest, is also the moment when the strict social order of courtship subtly tilts. For on this day, women held a curious right, the legal and cultural permission to propose marriage to a man. This rare chance wasn't a wild rebellion, but a carefully contained tradition, a sliver of control in an era when women's futures were tightly bound by family, property, and patriarchal expectations. Unlike the loud declarations we imagine today, these proposals were often delicate, strategic acts cloaked in custom, rumor, and a sprinkle of mischief. Historians still argue whether this practice was a genuine legal allowance or more a widespread folk belief that shaped behavior either way. The tradition left a deep mark on Irish courtship culture. Official records from the 1800s barely mention Leap Day proposals, yet countless local stories and folk songs celebrate the courage and cunning of women who dared to ask first. In a society where a woman's marriage could determine her economic survival, her social standing, and her family's alliances, this annual opportunity was more than symbolic. It was a tactical lifeline. Leap Day's unique position on the calendar made it perfect for subversion. Just as time itself leaped, so too could women leap the usual constraints and, for one day, turn the tables. Imagine a young woman named Mary in County Kerry, wrapping a thin wool shawl tight against the chill, clutching a small gift, a hand-stitched glove, or a ribboned kerchief, preparing to visit the man she had long admired, but dared not approach otherwise. Her heart pounds not from mere romantic hope, but from the weight of the tradition that grants her the audacity to ask, knowing all eyes and whispers will follow. To propose was not just a personal act. It was a public statement, a gamble wrapped in social ritual. The leap year proposal was a patchwork of customs that varied by region. In some parts, it was customary that if a man refused a woman's leap day proposal, he owed her a refusal fee, usually a gift of fabric, a new pair of shoes, or some other token of goodwill. This tradition added a social pressure that went beyond mere etiquette. Refusal could mark a man as stingy or unkind, damaging his reputation. In others, the day's proposals were framed by legends, like the tale of St. Bridget securing this right from St. Patrick after pleading her case with a twinkle of humor and resolve. Whether saintly or secular, these stories fueled the day's significance and gave women a whispered license to bend societal norms. Yet this wasn't an open invitation for all women to suddenly flood the streets with proposals. The act was tightly circumscribed, usually involving carefully crafted signals, a gift discreetly delivered, a whispered conversation, or a coded gesture during community gatherings like fairs or dances. The proposal often needed to be respectful, modest, and in line with local customs, or it risked social backlash. Leap Day was not a free-for-all, but a delicate negotiation between tradition and the desire for agency. You might smile at the quaintness of it, but remember, for many Irish women, especially in the rural countryside where life was hard and options limited. Marriage was a transaction as much as a romance. The right husband could mean access to land, livestock, and security. To propose marriage yourself was to stake a claim in that future, to say, I choose you, and I am ready to build with you. The power in that simple act was profound, quirky as it sounds. Some men reportedly dreaded February 29th, going so far as to hide indoors or don red petticoats, an ironic twist, since the color red often signaled boldness or danger. Whether legend or truth, the image of a would-be bachelor cloaked in red, tiptoeing away from prying eyes, perfectly captures the social tension under the surface of these leap day rituals. Historians still debate how widespread these practices really were, but the stories endure, echoing in Irish culture as a reminder that sometimes rules exist to be quietly bent. Imagine a village market square bathed in the low light of winter afternoon. Women exchange knowing glances, clutching small bundles or tokens meant for their chosen suitors. The air hums with anticipation, soft laughter, and the crunch of boots on frosted ground. A young woman slips a folded note into a man's coat pocket, a glove into his hand, symbols charged with meaning. He reads the silent invitation and, depending on his answer, must prepare for the social consequences. The whole community holds its breath in this annual, unspoken ceremony. Behind the ceremony lay a tangled web of economic and social factors. The dowry, often in cows, land rights, or household goods, remained central. By proposing, a woman sometimes gained leverage to negotiate better terms or to signal her seriousness and independence. It wasn't rebellion in the modern sense, but a subtle reshaping of gendered power within accepted bounds. Women's proposals might have been brief and rare, but they were never meaningless. So as you settle in tonight, think about this delicate dance of customs, a hidden history where women, on one special day, dared to ask for the futures they wanted. It's a story that waits patiently in the shadows, a quiet crack in the wall of tradition that shows us how small acts of courage can ripple across centuries. The legend of leap day proposals stirs up a peculiar image, men nervously hiding indoors, or donning red petticoats to escape the possibility of a surprise proposal. Whether this is an exaggeration spun by the imagination or a genuine practice is something historians still debate, but it does hint at a social atmosphere thick with playful tension and an undercurrent of male anxiety on this one special day. The idea that men might wear red petticoats, the very symbol of boldness and, ironically, feminine power to avoid leap day suitors, is at once funny and revealing. It exposes a subtle reversal of roles, where men, traditionally the ones expected to make proposals, found themselves the targets of social rituals that pressured them to accept or at least acknowledge women's advances. This curious practice wasn't widespread urban fashion, but more a rural, folkloric reality that mixed fact and fancy. Yet it symbolizes the complicated dance between genders in 19th century Ireland. You can picture it now, a young man in a small village, tiptoeing behind curtains, trying to avoid the keen eyes of the local women, especially those emboldened by the rare occasion. The idea of hiding might seem childish to us now, but in a society governed by strict decorum and social expectations, the consequences of refusing a proposal, or worse, being publicly proposed to and refusing, could be socially damaging. So, the red petticoat became an ironic disguise, a humorous way to deflect attention, a mark of the day's peculiar power dynamics. The color red itself was loaded with meaning, passion, danger, and the feminine. Wearing it as a shield against female initiative was both practical and symbolic. In some accounts, men who refused a leap day proposal had to pay a refusal fee, which was no small matter. This fee often took the form of a gift, like a new pair of gloves, a dress, or even shoes. The obligation to compensate a woman for her courage in proposing was a social sanction, a way to keep balance and respect in the delicate negotiations of courtship. This fee wasn't codified in law, but enforced by community expectations and the threat of gossip. Imagine turning down a proposal and then having to face not only the disappointed woman, but also the chatter of neighbors and relatives. The refusal fee acted as a kind of social fine, a reminder that even if a man said no, he owed her a token of respect. This refusal penalty made leap day proposals more than mere tradition. They became a social contract, a game with rules that everyone tacitly understood. Men couldn't simply dismiss these proposals lightly, they had to show they recognized the woman's boldness, even if they rejected it. And for women, it was a rare chance to leverage social customs to secure some degree of power in an otherwise male-dominated system. The refusal fee became a symbol of the seriousness and risk inherent in leap day proposals. The threat of social shame loomed large over bachelors. Refusing a proposal publicly could mark a man as cheap or unwilling to commit, potentially harming his chances in the future. The fear of ridicule made some men choose the path of least resistance acceptance, or at least the polite acknowledgement of the proposal. This dynamic highlights the social weight behind what might otherwise seem a quaint or humorous tradition. Leap day was a day when societal norms bent just enough to create new pressures and expectations. You might think this would lead to a flood of proposals and hurried engagements, but the tradition remained tightly controlled by custom and subtle social codes. Not every woman could simply pop the question on leap day. There were unspoken rules about who was eligible and when. Women typically chose men they knew well, often those they had long admired or with whom their families had some connection. The proposal was an extension of ongoing courtship rituals, not a sudden outburst. The tension and anticipation built over months or even years, with leap day serving as a ceremonial opportunity to formalize intentions. The image of men hiding in their homes or donning disguises like red petticoats also reflects a wider social discomfort with reversing gender roles, even temporarily. While women could propose on leap day, this didn't necessarily imply any fundamental challenge to the patriarchal order. It was a controlled exception, contained within folk tradition. Some men embraced the playful spirit of the day, while others treated it as an awkward ordeal. Either way, it was a day when normal expectations shifted just enough to allow a glimpse of female agency in a male-dominated world. An interesting fringe tidbit is that in some communities, men would prepare for leap day by making sure they were out of town or otherwise unreachable. Letters were sometimes sent warning men to avoid certain places on February 29th, or families might coach their sons on how to handle proposals tactfully. These practices underscored the genuine seriousness with which the tradition was taken. The idea of avoiding a proposal might seem silly today, but back then, marriage was an economic and social contract with long-term consequences. Historians still debate whether these practices were widespread or mainly confined to certain rural areas with strong oral traditions. Some argue that the whole notion of men wearing red petticoats is more folklore than reality, while others point to diaries and letters that mention similar customs. The truth probably lies somewhere in between a mix of playful exaggeration and genuine social ritual. What remains clear is that leap day proposals carried a significant cultural weight and influenced the behavior of men and women alike. In some places, the day's customs extended beyond proposals to include small celebrations or special gatherings. Dances, fairs, or communal meals might be organized around leap day, where women had more social freedom to express interest and men faced subtle pressures to respond. These events added a festive, almost carnival-like atmosphere to the otherwise strict social order, allowing a brief moment of role reversal and loosened etiquette. The playful tension between men trying to avoid proposals and women ready to ask made the day memorable. Another quirky detail, some men reportedly kept refusal gifts ready in advance, a pair of gloves or shoes, just in case they needed to smooth over a declined proposal. This pre-prepared gift was both practical and symbolic, showing that even refusal had to be managed carefully to preserve social harmony. The idea of a man carrying around shoes to give to a would-be fiancé is oddly charming, hinting at the performative aspects of these customs. Women, meanwhile, prepared themselves for leap day with careful thought. Their choice of gift to accompany the proposal was not random, but loaded with meaning. Gloves, for example, symbolized affection and partnership, while a kerchief might suggest a promise of protection. Some women even embroidered secret messages or initials into gifts, creating a private language understood only by the recipient. These small tokens elevated the proposal beyond words, embedding it in the rich material culture of courtship. Yet, the social risks for women were real. A rejected proposal, even with a refusal fee, could damage a woman's reputation or prospects. Leap day proposals required courage and social savvy. Women had to weigh their chances, the man's character, and the community's mood before making their move. The stakes were high in a world where marriage was often a necessity, rather than a choice. Leap Day offered a slender chance to seize agency, but it was never a guarantee. The tradition also sparked playful commentary and satire. Local poets and storytellers often wove Leap Day proposals into humorous verses, poking fun at bashful men and bold women. These stories helped normalize the custom, making it part of the social fabric. They allowed communities to explore gender roles with a wink, even as the serious business of marriage remained governed by tradition and economy. This mixture of social pressure, ritualized behavior, and humor created a unique cultural phenomenon. The leap year proposal was less a radical challenge to gender norms and more a culturally sanctioned space where women could express desire and initiative in a socially acceptable way. For men, it was a day of cautious negotiation, where rejection carried consequences and acceptance was often the easiest path. As you imagine this delicate dance, think about how such traditions shape the everyday lives of people, how small exceptions can ripple outward in meaning. Leap Day proposals remind us that history is not just a series of big events, but a tapestry woven with quiet, personal acts of courage and creativity. Women in 19th century Ireland, armed with folklore, social custom, and a rare calendar loophole, found ways to bend the rules without breaking them. So next time you glance at a calendar and spot February 29th, remember the centuries-old story of women daring to ask, men nervously tiptoeing, and communities holding their breath for the subtle promises that shaped futures in fields and villages. It's a story that whispers of agency in the margins and the quiet power of tradition turned on its head. The entanglement of marriage with dowries, land, and livestock formed the complex backdrop against which women's Leap Day proposals played out, revealing much about 19th century Irish society's rigid structures. For most rural families, marriage was not just the union of two people, but the negotiation of property, social status, and survival. The size of a woman's dowry, often measured in cows, acreage, or household goods, could determine the feasibility of a match. This reality shaped women's choices profoundly. Proposing marriage was as much a strategic move as a romantic one. When a woman flipped the script and proposed herself, she wasn't simply expressing personal desire. She was entering into a game with high stakes, challenging the established norms that kept women in economically dependent positions. Picture a young woman named Bridget, the eldest daughter in a farming family struggling with thin soil and shifting tides of tenant rights. Her dowry is modest, maybe a few sheep and some linens, but her intelligence and charm make her a desirable match. Yet, if she waits passively for suitors, she risks being passed over for wealthier brides. Leap Day offers Bridget a rare chance to assert herself, to propose a union that might secure not only her future, but that of her family's farm. This act of proposal becomes a silent negotiation, a request for partnership, respect, and stability in uncertain times. Dowries were often the currency of marriage negotiations, but they also carried a symbolic weight. They represented a woman's family's investment in the marriage and a guarantee of her well-being. When women proposed, they sometimes sought to leverage this investment differently, negotiating terms or signaling their readiness to bring value to the union. This reversal unsettled traditional assumptions that the man's family controlled the exchange. Historians still argue whether Leap Day proposals truly shifted economic power or remained a symbolic gesture within a patriarchal system. But what is clear is that these moments gave women a sliver of agency otherwise scarce in their lives. The importance of land and livestock in dowries cannot be overstated. Ireland's agrarian economy meant that a woman's marriage tied not only two people, but two parcels of land, two herds of cattle, and two family lineages. This made the choice of husband a matter of economic survival as much as love. Proposing marriage, therefore, was a calculated risk. If accepted, the woman gained entry into a household that could provide security. If refused, she might face social consequences or reduced prospects. This tension added urgency to Leap Day proposals, turning them into delicate economic negotiations disguised as romantic gestures. It wasn't just the tangible dowry items that mattered, but also the reputation and social standing they signified. A well-dowered bride was a prize, and her proposal could be seen as an act of confidence or ambition. Some women used Leap Day to signal their seriousness and readiness to contribute to the household's prosperity. flipping the stereotype of passive femininity. In some cases, this led to whispered speculation: was she too forward? Did she overreach? These questions revealed the fine line women had to walk between agency and social acceptance. One quirky detail recorded in some rural communities was the use of symbolic objects in proposals that referenced dowry items. For example, a woman might offer a miniature cow figurine carved from wood or bone, along with her proposal gift. This small token conveyed her family's wealth or intentions without explicit negotiation. Such rituals added layers of meaning to the proposal, blending economic realities with cultural symbolism. It was a way for women to speak their values subtly, respecting tradition while asserting their worth. Social standing also played a role in determining who could propose and how seriously proposals were taken. Women from wealthier families had more leverage. Their leap day proposals were often expected and honored. For poor women, proposing could be riskier, as rejection might be more damaging to their already precarious social position. This disparity reminds us that traditions like leap day proposals were not universally liberating, but mediated by class and status. Marriage prospects were further complicated by the laws and customs governing property rights. In many cases, women's property was transferred to their husbands upon marriage, limiting their economic independence. Proposing marriage, then, was not only about personal desire, but a strategic move within a system that often left women vulnerable. By taking the initiative, women could negotiate terms or influence the timing of marriage. Seeking to protect their interests within limited options, the act of proposing also intersected with reputations for virtue and propriety. Women who proposed had to balance boldness with decorum, ensuring they did not appear too aggressive or desperate. Leap Day offered a socially sanctioned escape hatch for women to make their intentions known without damaging their standing. However, this safety net was fragile. Gossip and judgment could turn a bold proposal into scandal if not handled delicately. Interestingly, some accounts describe women using leap day proposals to circumvent parental control. Families often arranged matches, but the tradition gave women a rare chance to choose for themselves or push for a preferred match. This subtle defiance highlights the tensions between individual desires and family expectations, a theme that resonates beyond 19th century Ireland. Leap day proposals, therefore, became a form of quiet rebellion, a way for women to exert limited control in a constrained social order. Another fascinating facet is how leap day proposals could influence negotiations around dowries. In some cases, a woman's proposal implied readiness to accept less in dowry or to bring her own resources to the marriage. This flexibility could make her more attractive to men reluctant to pay high bride prices. The tradition, therefore, had economic ripple effects, shaping bargaining dynamics and potentially easing the financial burdens of marriage. Historians still debate whether leap day proposals genuinely empowered women economically or were more symbolic performances upheld by tradition. Some argue that the practice reinforced gender roles by confining female initiative to a single day, thereby limiting broader agency. Others see it as a clever cultural adaptation that allowed women a voice within a patriarchal society. The truth likely lies in the nuances, reflecting a complex interplay between social norms, economic realities, and personal agency. In some communities, the dowry itself was ceremonially presented alongside the leap day proposal. The woman's family might display livestock or goods as tangible proof of their daughter's value. This public exhibition reinforced the economic dimension of the union and heightened the stakes of acceptance or refusal. Such rituals blurred the lines between courtship and business, love and property, highlighting the multifaceted nature of marriage. The entwining of marriage, a dowry, and proposal traditions also impacted family alliances and social networks. A leap day proposal could seal a strategic partnership between clans or families, influencing local power dynamics. Women proposing on this day thus became key players in broader social negotiations, not just romantic ones. Their actions rippled beyond personal lives into the fabric of community relations. For women who dared to propose, the day was both hopeful and fraught with risk. Acceptance meant security and status. Refusal could bring shame or diminish prospects. The stakes turned a simple gesture into a moment charged with economic and social consequence. This tension adds depth to the leap day tradition, revealing it as a nuanced cultural phenomenon rather than a quaint anecdote. Imagine the quiet courage required for a woman to step forward with a carefully chosen token, eyes steady despite the risk. Her proposal was a statement of readiness to negotiate love, economics, and survival all at once. Through this lens, Leap Day proposals emerge as acts of resilience and strategy, woven into the patchwork of rural Irish life. As you rest tonight, consider how these entwined threads of dowry, land, and reputation shaped not only who could propose, but how marriage was understood. It wasn't simply a matter of hearts, but of livelihoods, honor, and community ties. Leap Day, with its rare invitation for women to propose, gave a fleeting but meaningful crack in the old order, a chance to assert choice in a world that offered so little. The mischievous legend of St. Bridget securing permission for women's Leap Day proposals from St. Patrick adds a layer of folklore that enriches the social fabric surrounding this rare tradition. While historians still debate the origins and authenticity of this tale, it remains a cherished story that speaks volumes about the cultural attitudes toward gender roles and authority in 19th century Ireland. According to the legend, St. Bridget, known for her wit and persistence, petitioned St. Patrick to allow women a single day every 4 years to propose marriage, thus bending the strict rules that otherwise forbade such acts. This story, whether fact or fable, reflects the broader theme of women finding creative, sometimes cheeky ways to carve out agency within a patriarchal society that tightly controlled courtship and marriage. You can almost hear the whispered exchanges in the stone churches and smoky hearths as villagers pass down this tale. St. Bridget, with a twinkle in her eye and a sly smile, representing the spirit of female ingenuity and determination, managed to secure a concession from the revered St. Patrick. The negotiation was less about divine decree, and more about a cultural acknowledgement that, even in a rigid social order, there needed to be space for women's voices. This legend turned Leap Day proposals from a mere custom into a story imbued with sanctity and social approval, lending them legitimacy and charm. The playful nature of this legend also hints at a subtle critique of authority. St. Patrick, the symbol of ecclesiastical power and traditional order, is depicted as yielding, however reluctantly, to the persistent and clever St. Bridget. This narrative suggests that even the most entrenched structures of power could be bent by humor, tenacity, and timing. It's no accident that this story centers on these two saints, both important figures in Irish Christian history, because it links the Leap Day tradition to larger themes of negotiation between gender, power, and tradition. Historians still argue whether St. Bridget's intercession was a genuine historical event or a later invention to explain and legitimize a folk custom. Some scholars suggest the story arose as a way to reconcile the Leap Day proposals with Catholic doctrine, which generally discouraged women from initiating marriage. Others see it as a symbolic tale representing the negotiation between secular customs and church authority. Regardless of its historicity, the legend persists because it captures the essence of the Leap Day tradition's playful subversion of social norms. One quirky detail from some versions of the legend is that St. Bridget supposedly used a calendar carved from a cow's horn to convince St. Patrick of the necessity of the Leap Day exception. This image of a saint wielding agricultural tools to argue for social reform resonates deeply with rural Irish life, where farming and faith were inseparable. It adds an earthy, humorous dimension to the story, reminding us that these traditions grew not only from law and doctrine, but from the lived experiences of communities rooted in the land. The tale also serves as a moral parable, suggesting that persistence and creativity can open doors even in the most resistant of systems. St. Bridget's clever negotiation embodies the spirit of those women who, every 4 years, dared to propose marriage, defying convention with a smile and a well-timed gesture. Through this story, the Leap Day proposal becomes not just a social custom, but a symbolic victory of female agency. The association with saints also gave the tradition a spiritual aura that helped protect it from criticism. In a deeply religious society, linking Leap Day proposals to revered figures made it harder for conservative voices to dismiss or condemn the practice outright. It allowed the custom to be framed as a kind of divine permission rather than a subversive act. This clever framing ensured the tradition's survival across generations. Moreover, the legend reveals the intertwining of pagan and Christian elements in Irish culture. Leap Day itself is a quirk of the Gregorian calendar, yet the story of St. Bridget and St. Patrick situates the tradition firmly within Christian Ireland. This blend of timekeeping, folklore, and religious symbolism illustrates how cultural practices evolve by layering meanings and adapting to shifting social contexts. It also shows how women's roles were negotiated within both secular and sacred spheres. Some local communities still celebrate St. Bridget's role with small festivals or church services near Leap Day, honoring the spirit of female initiative and blessing proposals made on this special occasion. These observances, though modest, keep the legend alive and reinforce its cultural significance. They remind us that even small stories can carry enduring power and meaning, shaping identities and social practices over centuries. Interestingly, the playful tone of the legend contrasts with the seriousness of marriage in the 19th century. While proposing was a grave matter involving dowries and family alliances, the story of St. Bridget and St. Patrick adds levity and hope. It suggests that beneath the surface of strict social codes, there was room for humor and negotiation, for women to assert themselves with wit rather than force. This tonal balance between gravity and playfulness is part of what makes the Leap Day tradition so compelling. The legend also connects to broader themes of female leadership and influence in Irish history. St. Bridget is celebrated as one of Ireland's patron saints, known for her generosity, wisdom, and strength. Portraying her as a champion for women's rights to propose marriage aligns the Leap Day custom with a long tradition of female agency in religious and social life. It situates the practice within a narrative of empowerment that transcends the specifics of courtship. Historians continue to explore how this legend reflects changing attitudes toward gender and authority. Some argue that the story represents a cultural negotiation during a time when Ireland faced political and religious upheaval, using folklore to assert social values subtly. Others see it as a way to explain an otherwise puzzling custom, providing a neat origin story that fits comfortably within Ireland's rich tapestry of saints' lives and local traditions. The legend of St. Bridget and St. Patrick thus acts as a cultural anchor, giving shape and meaning to the Leap Day proposal tradition. It softens the edges of what might otherwise be seen as a daring social challenge, embedding it in a narrative of divine permission and saintly advocacy. This blend of the sacred and the playful helped the tradition endure, offering women a socially acceptable path to assert choice in marriage. As you drift through this tale tonight, imagine the flickering candlelight in a humble Irish cottage where a young woman hears this story from her grandmother. It's a story that comforts and inspires, a reminder that even in a world of strict rules, there's room for cleverness, courage, and a bit of holy mischief. Leap Day proposals, framed by this legend, become not just a custom, but a celebration of female spirit and resilience. So as the calendar waits for its rare extra day, remember that behind the practice lies a story of negotiation, faith, and cheeky persistence, a tale of how one woman's cleverness might have shifted the course of courtship and granted generations of Irish women a precious, if fleeting, power. You find yourself waking early to the muted glow of dawn over a misty Irish village, the scent of porridge and peat smoke weaving through the chilly air. Here, amidst the humble rhythms of daily life, courtship unfolds not in grand gestures but in small, repeated rituals. The heartbeat of rural connection, breakfast, of all moments, becomes a subtle stage for romance, where conversation over shared oats and brown bread carries hints as potent as any love letter. In 19th century Ireland, the seemingly mundane act of breaking fast together was imbued with social and emotional significance, a chance for a woman to observe a potential suitor's character, wit, and temperament. It was at these communal tables and firesides that relationships often took their first tentative steps, sometimes culminating in the rare but bold Leap Day proposals that quietly rewrote the usual story. You watch as neighbors gather after morning chores to exchange news, laughter, and glances over bowls of porridge thickened with buttermilk. This is the courtship ground of the ordinary, where long glances and casual touches mean more than polished words at the dance halls. The way a man stirs his porridge, the steadiness of his gaze, or the kindness with which he serves the children can all signal suitability as a husband. Meanwhile, women in the room measure patience, humor, and strength, qualities essential for the hardships of farm life and marriage. The slow, steady rhythm of these morning rituals embeds a subtle language of attraction and respect, a shared social code learned through repetition rather than declaration. Historians still debate whether the prominence of breakfast as a courtship moment was unique to Ireland or part of a broader rural European pattern, but the evidence from letters and folklore suggests that in Irish villages, These moments were crucial. The practical nature of rural life meant that formal events were rare and costly. So much of the courting happened within everyday contexts. The hearth and the meal became a stage where affection was shown not through lavish gifts but through attentiveness, shared stories, and the gentle teasing that wove bonds tighter than words alone could. At larger communal gatherings such as the matchmaking fairs and parish dances, this intimacy expanded but retained its focus on ritual and restraint. The fairs, sometimes rowdy and loud, were places where families and individuals came to seek alliances. Here, the crunch of boots on frozen earth mingled with the thrum of fiddles and laughter, while women and men assessed potential partners not just for attraction but for family background, work ethic, and wealth. The social dance was as much about negotiation and alliance building as it was about romance. For women contemplating leap day proposals, these gatherings were fertile ground to gauge interest and prepare for their rare day to speak openly. Dances, often held in drafty church halls or barns, were carefully choreographed social events. The dance card, a list of partners and dances, served as a public ledger of one's desirability and social ties. For women, securing a dance with a preferred partner was a subtle sign of mutual interest. Yet, beyond the spinning reels and polkas, the glances exchanged and whispered words meant the world. It was here, amid the foot stomping and fiddle playing, that many young couples first crossed the threshold of possibility. The dance floor, a communal space with strict rules, doubled as a delicate arena of flirtation and negotiation. You notice how women, especially those eyeing a leap day proposal, prepared carefully for these events, dressing in their best linens, pinning flowers, and practicing smiles that blended shyness with invitation. Their movements, laughter, and even choice of dance partner sent coded messages to those who knew the language of courtship. It was a game of appearances and subtlety, where too much boldness risked gossip and too little interest meant invisibility. The dance floor, therefore, was a stage for both social conformity and quiet rebellion. Matchmaking fairs like those in Lisdoonvarna and Telltown were more than just social occasions. They were economic and cultural institutions. At these fairs, cattle, goods, and people changed hands in a whirlwind of negotiation and hope. Women often attended with their families or chaperones, their futures riding on successful matches made in these brief, intense gatherings. The fairs were noisy, sometimes chaotic, with vendors hawking wares, musicians playing lively tunes, and townsfolk exchanging news. Yet, within this bustle, the business of love and marriage was conducted with a mix of tradition, superstition, and keen strategy. The morning porridge table, the dance hall, and the bustling fairground all formed a continuum of courtship rituals that shaped rural Irish life. Each setting offered different chances to observe, test, and connect with a potential spouse. For women, these rituals built the foundations that made leap day proposals not sudden outbursts but the culmination of careful social navigation. Their proposals were informed by months, sometimes years, of shared glances, conversations, and small tokens exchanged in these everyday moments. In these communal spaces, the economy of reputation was paramount. A woman who proposed too early or without sufficient social backing risked scandal. One who waited too long might lose her chance. The social scripts governing these rituals were complex and deeply ingrained, ensuring that courtship remained a careful balance of personal desire and community expectation. Leap day proposals, then, were a rare breach of this balance, an exception made possible by tradition, yet still bound by the rules of decorum. A quirky detail of these gatherings was the role of food as a social signal. At fairs, the sharing of cakes, butter, or even a flask of whiskey could convey friendliness or serious intent. At dances, a woman might slip a small piece of candy or a flower to her favored partner. Subtle gestures loaded with meaning, these small acts enriched the texture of courtship, weaving a complex social tapestry in which leap day proposals would later find their place. You might chuckle, imagining a shy girl passing a crumb of cake under a tablecloth as a secret message, or a boy nervously clutching a fiddle bow while trying to catch a glimpse of his intended. These seemingly trivial moments carried the weight of futures, hopes, and family alliances. They remind us that history lives not only in grand events, but in the quiet, repeated acts of daily life. Historians still argue over the degree to which these social rituals empowered women. or simply reinforced existing hierarchies. Some see the communal and ritualized nature of courtship as limiting, constraining personal freedom under the guise of tradition. Others highlight the spaces within these rituals where women exercised influence, choosing partners and negotiating terms with subtlety and skill. Leap day proposals emerge within this contested landscape as both a product of and a challenge to the social order. So, as you nestle deeper into your blankets tonight, imagine the clatter of spoons against bowls in a crowded kitchen, the swell of fiddles at a distant dance, and the warm breath of a hopeful young woman sharing breakfast or a step on the dance floor. These everyday moments, stitched together, gave rise to a tradition where, just once every 4 years, a woman could leap forward and ask for a hand in marriage, a small rebellion wrapped in the quiet rituals of rural Irish life. You step into the world of the rural Irish matchmaker, a figure both revered and quietly feared, whose winking eye and knowing smile shaped more futures than any preacher or magistrate. These matchmakers were the social architects of courtship, the skilled negotiators who balanced families' desires, economic realities, and personal quirks with uncanny precision. Their role was part mediator, part strategist, and part confidant, a blend of social glue and subtle power broker. In a landscape where direct communication between young men and women was often limited by social decorum and family oversight, the matchmaker opened a channel through which feelings and intentions could be conveyed and tested. Women seeking to propose on Leap Day sometimes bribed or persuaded these crafty figures to tilt arrangements in their favor, knowing that a well-placed word could make the difference between acceptance and heartbreak. Imagine the matchmaker as a woman who knows every family's story, every rumor, every wrinkle in a suitor's reputation. She moves through village lanes and hearths like a shadow, gathering information and reading the unspoken language of glances and gestures. Her winks and nods carry meaning. A whispered word from her can elevate a humble girl's prospects or, conversely, dash a match before it begins. Families prized her advice, and young women relied on her discretion. In many ways, she was the gatekeeper of social harmony, ensuring that matches made sense not only for individuals, but for the community's delicate balance. This world of matchmaking was rife with strategic maneuvering. Some matchmakers accepted gifts or favors to sway their recommendations, blurring the lines between service and influence. Women who wished to propose often cultivated relationships with these intermediaries, offering homemade bread, eggs, or a kind word to gain favor. These small bribes weren't mere corruption, but part of a long tradition of social reciprocity, where personal connection and reputation were the currency of power. The matchmaker's nod might seal a woman's chances to make a leap day proposal that a man could hardly refuse. Historians still debate whether matchmakers empowered women by giving them a voice in the marriage market, or constrained them by reinforcing patriarchal expectations through gatekeeping. Some see the matchmaker's role as a necessary adaptation in a society that limited women's direct participation in courtship. Others argue that this system preserved male control under the guise of mediation. Either way, the matchmaker was a pivotal figure in the dance of desire and duty, shaping how and when proposals, including those on Leap Day, took place. One curious detail is that matchmakers often had a flair for drama, spinning tales and rumors to test loyalties or prompt decisions. A well-timed story of a suitor's generosity or a bride's virtue could tip the scales. This theatrical element made matchmaking not just a business, but a subtle art form, blending psychology, gossip, and intuition. For women planning the Leap Day proposals, understanding and working with this social performance was critical. The matchmaker's influence extended beyond pairing couples. She also helped negotiate the practical details, dowries, living arrangements, and even the timing of the wedding. For Leap Day proposals, her role could be decisive in smoothing over any awkwardness caused by the unusual custom of women asking first, by advising families and men beforehand. She reduced resistance and shaped community acceptance of the tradition. In this way, the matchmaker acted as both protector and promoter of Leap Day's delicate social dance. These women were often older, experienced, and well-respected in their communities, though not always free from suspicion. Some were accused of meddling too much or favoring certain families, while others were beloved as wise counselors and loyal friends. Their position straddled the line between insider and outsider, powerful yet vulnerable to the gossip they navigated daily. This ambiguity added a rich texture to their role, making them fascinating figures in social history. For young women, cultivating a positive relationship with the matchmaker was often as important as any other preparation for courtship. A friendly word, a thoughtful gift, or a show of respect could open doors otherwise closed. Matchmakers sometimes coach women on how to behave in dances, fairs, and family gatherings, offering advice on modesty, charm, and timing. This mentorship was invaluable, especially for leap day proposers who needed to balance boldness with propriety. The strategic nature of matchmaking sometimes led to alliances and rivalries, reflecting broader community dynamics. Families might compete to have their daughters favored by a respected matchmaker, while others sought to block matches they found unsuitable. These social games influenced not only marriages but the distribution of power and resources within villages. Leap day proposals, with their unusual role reversal, added a layer of complexity to these negotiations, forcing matchmakers to adapt their tactics. A quirky aspect of this world was the occasional use of coded language or symbolic gestures facilitated by the matchmaker. For example, delivering a particular flower or arranging a meeting at a specific place and time could convey secret messages between suitor and beloved, all orchestrated behind the scenes. Such subtleties enriched the courtship rituals and allowed women to express interest without overt declaration, preserving social decorum while advancing personal desires. Despite their power, matchmakers faced challenges from changing social and economic conditions. The rise of emigration, shifts in land ownership, and increasing urbanization began to alter traditional courtship patterns by the late 19th century. New forms of communication and mobility reduced reliance on local matchmakers, even as their cultural legacy persisted. Nevertheless, during the height of the leap day proposal tradition, their influence was profound and often decisive. You can imagine the matchmaker's sly smile when a young woman arrives, cheeks flushed, clutching a small token and whispering her hopes. The matchmaker listens, nods, and begins weaving the threads, gauging the man's interest, advising on timing, and perhaps whispering a little encouragement. In this moment, the matchmaker becomes a silent partner in a woman's bold leap into agency, turning social tradition into a finely tuned strategy. This collaboration between women and matchmakers reveals a hidden network of female power and solidarity within a patriarchal system. Leap day proposals were not just acts of individual courage, but part of a collective effort supported by wise women who knew the terrain. Together, they navigated rules, expectations, and reputations to open small windows of choice. Historians argue whether these networks subverted or sustained existing hierarchies, but they undeniably show that women found creative ways to shape their destinies. The matchmaker's wink and nod were more than social rituals. They were acts of quiet rebellion and alliance, turning the dance of courtship into a game women could influence. So, as you sink deeper into your pillow tonight, picture the matchmaker's knowing glance, the whispered confidences, and the subtle negotiations that lay beneath the surface of leap day proposals. This world of strategy, friendship, and social acumen shaped the lives and loves of countless women, offering them a chance, however fleeting, to leap forward and ask for the futures they dreamed of. You slip quietly into the secretive world where a letter, a glove, or even a simple nod became the discreet language of proposal, small tokens carefully chosen and laden with meaning to signal intentions without words. In 19th century Ireland, direct declarations of love and marriage were often constrained by social norms, family oversight, and the ever-watchful eyes of neighbors. For women, especially those planning leap day proposals, subtlety was a survival skill. A glove left on a doorstep, a hand-stitched note tucked inside a waistcoat, or a carefully folded letter could serve as both invitation and declaration, allowing women to propose marriage while maintaining the veneer of modesty and propriety demanded by their communities. This quiet exchange of tokens was a dance of shadows and whispers, a coded conversation that could shift the course of a lifetime. Picture a young woman named Neve, her fingers trembling as she delicately places a single white glove on the doorstep of the man she admires. The glove, a symbol of affection and partnership, waits silently for him to discover it. When he finds it, the meaning is clear to those in the know. A proposal is on the table, but the ball is now in his court. This gesture allowed women to propose without uttering a word, protecting their reputation while asserting agency. In a society where overt female assertiveness could be frowned upon, these silent messages created a safe space for boldness. Letters, too, played a crucial role. Women sometimes crafted notes embroidered with initials or small symbols, which they slipped into the folds of a suitor's clothing or passed through trusted intermediaries. These notes were often written in poetic or symbolic language, allowing the recipient to interpret the message with nuance. Such correspondence required courage, creativity, and a network of trusted friends or family to deliver them discreetly. Leap day proposals that involved letters carried an air of mystery and romance, blending the practical with the poetic. Historians still debate the extent to which these discreet gestures were widespread or confined to particular regions or social classes. Some argue that the practice was a rural phenomenon, while others point to urban examples among the burgeoning middle class. Regardless, the use of symbolic tokens in proposals underscores a broader theme: women navigated strict social rules with ingenuity, finding ways to express desires within the constraints of their world. One quirky aspect of this silent language was the use of specific glove colors or embroidery patterns to convey additional meaning. For instance, a white glove might symbolize purity and a sincere proposal, while a glove with a stitched heart or initials personalized the message further. In some cases, gloves were gifted as tokens of affection prior to Leap Day, laying the groundwork for a formal proposal on the appointed day. This layering of symbols added depth to the social dance and allowed women to craft a narrative of intent that suited their personalities and circumstances. Another fascinating custom involved secret stitching. Some women embroidered their names, initials, or even short love notes into the linings or hems of garments gifted to their intended. This intimate detail transformed everyday objects into vessels of affection and promise. The discovery of such hidden messages by the recipient was a private moment of connection, strengthening bonds before any public announcement. These clandestine communications reflected the careful balancing act women performed between societal expectations and personal expression. The practice of gifting gloves or letters also tied into larger European traditions of courtship and romance. Yet, in the Irish context, it took on particular significance due to the social constraints on female initiative. These tokens were not mere gifts, but carefully calibrated statements of intent and hope. They allowed women to propose without breaking the delicate fabric of community norms, preserving honor while pushing boundaries. In some communities, passing such tokens required the involvement of a trusted messenger, often a family member or friend who could vouch for the sender's intentions. This added a layer of social verification, protecting women from misinterpretation or scandal. The messenger's role was delicate. A misplaced token or misunderstood message could cause embarrassment or worse. Thus, the network of communication supporting these secret proposals was as important as the tokens themselves. The letter, the glove, the note. These were not only practical tools, but also deeply emotional objects, carriers of hope, longing, and risk. Women invested time, care, and imagination into their creation and delivery. For those proposing on Leap Day, these gestures embodied the courage required to ask for a future in a society where their voices were often muted. Some accounts tell of men keeping treasured boxes or drawers where they stored these tokens, each one a story of affection and possibility. A single glove, carefully mended or preserved, could represent an accepted proposal or a cherished memory. These objects became part of family histories, tangible links between generations and the quiet moments that shaped lives. Historians continue to explore how these customs intersected with literacy rates, economic status, and geographic factors. In rural areas with limited access to formal education, embroidery and gifting objects provided alternative means of communication. Among wealthier classes, letters might be more elaborate, with delicate handwriting and poetic flourishes. Regardless of the form, the underlying function was the same: to bridge the gap between desire and social constraint. The reliance on tokens also highlights the emotional complexity of courtship. Women proposing had to manage not only their own hopes, but the risks of public censure, family disapproval, and potential rejection. The use of symbols and secret messages allowed them to gauge responses before making their intentions fully known, offering a measure of control in an uncertain process. Leap Day proposals, embedded in this culture of discreet communication, were both personal and communal acts, While the gesture was directed at a single man, it was also observed and interpreted by the wider community, which held the power to bless or condemn. The careful choreography of glove gifting and letter passing was part of maintaining social harmony, even as it challenged gender norms. You might smile, imagining a young woman stitching a tiny heart into the hem of a handkerchief, her thoughts dancing between hope and fear, or a man discovering a folded note tucked inside his coat, reading it by the flickering light of a peat fire, feeling both surprise and tenderness. These intimate moments, small and silent, shaped the grander narrative of Leap Day proposals and the lives they transformed. So tonight, as you cradle your own tokens of connection, texts, emails, quiet glances, remember that the language of love has always been rich with subtlety and courage. The letter, the glove, the secret stitch remind us that even within the strictest confines, hearts find ways to speak, daring to leap forward in hope and trust. You stand on the edge of a curious social moment, the refusal. In 19th century Ireland, saying no to a Leap Day proposal was never as simple as a polite decline. It carried consequences that rippled through the community and marked the man as much as the woman who dared to ask. The refusal fee, a peculiarly Irish social custom, turned rejection into a ritualized act of compensation. A man who declined a woman's Leap Day proposal was expected to buy her a gift, often a new dress, a pair of shoes, or some other token of goodwill. This custom, though unwritten in formal law, was enforced by the watchful eyes of neighbors and the court of public opinion. The refusal fee was less about the material value, and more about acknowledging the woman's courage and preserving her dignity. It was a social balancing act, ensuring that even in rejection, respect was maintained. Imagine a chilly February afternoon in a small village, where a man who has just refused a proposal is known to everyone by the following week. The weight of gossip and expectation presses upon him, and he feels compelled to visit the local dressmaker or cobbler to purchase the mandated gift. This act serves multiple purposes. It smooths over the social awkwardness, signals generosity and good humor, and, perhaps most importantly, publicly affirms the woman's value. The refusal fee became a kind of social insurance, protecting women from the sting of rejection by turning it into a moment of exchange rather than loss. The refusal fee also reveals the complex interplay between gender roles and social expectations. While women had the rare opportunity to propose on Leap Day, men retained the power to accept or refuse. Yet, refusal was not without cost. The fee acted as a gentle check on male authority, reminding men that dismissing a woman's proposal carried social obligations. This subtle system of checks and balances highlights the negotiated nature of gender power within the cultural framework. Historians still argue about the origins and prevalence of refusal fees. Some suggest it was a remnant of earlier Celtic customs where compensation for spurned suitors or brides was common. Others view it as a Victorian-era invention to maintain decorum amid changing social attitudes. Regardless, the practice underscored the seriousness with which Leap Day proposals were taken and the community's role in enforcing social norms. One quirky detail involves the types of gifts given as refusal fees. Shoes were particularly popular, symbolizing a woman's readiness to walk away with dignity if rejected. Dresses, often made from bright fabrics, served as visible markers of the woman's continued desirability and social standing. In some areas, the refusal fee could also include gloves or ribbons, tokens rich in symbolic meaning related to love and courtship. The choice of gift was itself a statement, carefully considered to maintain honor and social balance. The refusal fee placed men in a delicate position. While they retained the right to refuse, the social cost made rejection a calculated decision. Some men might have accepted proposals to avoid the fee, even if unsure of their feelings, leading to matches born more from social pressure than affection. This dynamic adds a layer of complexity to the narrative of Leap Day proposals, revealing the tensions between personal choice and communal expectation. Women, aware of the refusal fee custom, sometimes used it as a strategic tool. By proposing to a man with a solid reputation or resources, they could leverage the social cost of refusal to their advantage. A well-timed proposal could compel a man to accept, not purely out of affection, but to avoid the embarrassment or expense of refusal. This tactic turned Leap Day into a moment of subtle negotiation, where social and economic factors intertwined with personal desires. The refusal fee also served as a public performance, The exchange of gifts following a refused proposal was often witnessed or discussed among neighbors, reinforcing community bonds and shared values. It transformed private rejection into a communal event, reminding everyone of the social codes governing behavior. This public dimension made the refusal fee more than a simple transaction. It was a ritual that maintained social harmony. In some instances, failure to pay the refusal fee could lead to social ostracism or scandal. A man who refused a proposal without offering a gift risked being labeled stingy or disrespectful, damaging his standing in the community. This social pressure ensured compliance and highlighted the importance of generosity and honor in courtship practices. The refusal fee thus functioned as a form of social justice, balancing power between genders in a subtle yet effective way. This custom also reveals the performative nature of courtship rituals in rural Ireland. The refusal fee was as much about appearances and reputation as about genuine feelings. It compelled men to publicly demonstrate respect and care, regardless of their private intentions. Women, in turn, could use this expectation to assert their social value, reinforcing their position within the community. The refusal fee tradition also ties into broader themes of gift exchange and reciprocity in Irish culture. Gifts during courtship symbolized mutual respect and commitment, creating social bonds that extended beyond the individuals involved. Refusal fees fit within this cultural framework, emphasizing that rejection need not sever ties but could be managed through rituals of exchange. You might smile imagining a man nervously pacing the village street, clutching a carefully wrapped package destined for the woman who just proposed, hoping the gift will smooth over any awkwardness and restore his standing. Meanwhile, the woman waits quietly, a mix of hope and dignity in her eyes, ready to accept the gift or the promise it represents. These moments, charged with emotion and social meaning, form the texture of leap day proposals and the delicate dance of acceptance and refusal. Historians still debate whether the refusal fee empowered women by giving them leverage or reinforced their dependence by commodifying rejection. Some argue it created a space for women to claim respect and recognition, while others see it as a reminder of their limited agency. Regardless, the practice shaped the social landscape of courtship, adding a layer of complexity to the tradition. As you settle tonight, consider how this refusal fee ritual transformed the simple act of saying no into a nuanced social contract, reflecting the intertwined threads of gender, economy, and community in 19th century Ireland. Leap day proposals and their consequences reveal a culture where personal desires were negotiated within shared expectations, where courage met caution in a dance as old as love itself. You step into the shadowy, almost eerie realm of the wakes of the unwed, a haunting custom that both reflected and reinforced the social anxieties surrounding unmarried women in 19th century Ireland. These mock funerals, held for women who had reached a certain age without marriage, were a blend of social ritual, community spectacle, and grim warning, far from a private mourning. These wakes were public events, sometimes celebratory, sometimes somber, that marked a woman's transition from hopeful bride to social outcast, a symbolic death of her prospects. Yet, paradoxically, some women turned this tradition into a source of strange power, using the ritual to claim visibility, assert identity, and in rare cases, reshape their social standing. This strange dance between shame and agency reveals the complexities of female life in a society where marriage was central to a woman's existence. Imagine a village gathering where the air is thick with peat smoke and whispered conversations. A woman who remains unmarried past the socially accepted age finds herself the focus of a wake, a ceremony resembling a funeral but with no actual death. Friends, neighbors, and family assemble to lament the death of her single status, often with a mixture of sympathy, jest, and social commentary. The woman might lie in a bed, draped in black shawls, while mourners offer blessings or humorous tales. The wake served as a communal acknowledgement that her life was entering a different phase, one marked by loneliness or marginalization. These wakes were rooted in deep social fears about female sexuality, economic survival, and community cohesion. In a world where women's economic opportunities were limited, marriage was often the only path to security. Unmarried women faced precarious futures, relying on family charity or poorly paid labor. The wake symbolized the community's recognition of this reality, a ritualized way of confronting what was perceived as a loss. Yet beneath this bleak surface lay a complex social mechanism that balanced compassion with control. Historians still debate whether these wakes were primarily acts of cruelty or community support. Some accounts suggest that the ceremonies included moments of humor, music, and storytelling, providing the unmarried woman with a form of social integration rather than exclusion. Others emphasize the ritual's role in reinforcing norms and encouraging conformity by highlighting the consequences of failing to marry. The dual nature of these wakes reflects the ambivalence with which society viewed unmarried women as both vulnerable and transgressive. A quirky aspect of the wakes was the use of symbolic items. Sometimes the woman would hold a sprig of rosemary, symbolizing remembrance, or be surrounded by gifts from friends signaling hope and goodwill. The ceremonial use of black shawls, candles, and other funeral accoutrements created a liminal space where the boundaries between life and social death blurred. This theatricality gave the wakes a performative quality that could be both daunting and empowering. Some women subverted the wake tradition by using it to assert their independence. By participating fully and with a sense of humor or defiance, they transformed the ritual from a marker of shame into a celebration of selfhood. In rare cases, the wake became a moment of social solidarity, where unmarried women banded together to challenge their marginalization. These acts of resilience highlight how women navigated and sometimes reshaped the social scripts imposed upon them. The wake also had practical implications. In some villages, the ceremony marked the transfer of responsibilities or property rights, formally acknowledging the woman's changed status. It could affect inheritance, living arrangements, and social obligations. Thus, the wake was not just symbolic, but embedded in the legal and economic realities of rural life. This custom intersected with leap day proposals in poignant ways. For women who dared to propose marriage, the wake served as a stark reminder of the social stakes involved. A successful proposal could prevent the social death symbolized by the wake, while rejection might hasten it. The tension between hope and despair in this context adds emotional depth to the leap day tradition. The wakes also reveal the broader social mechanisms through which communities enforce conformity and manage deviance. By publicly dramatizing the consequences of remaining unmarried, the wake reinforced expectations and norms. Yet the communal nature of the ritual also provided a space for collective reflection and negotiation of values. You might feel a chill imagining the shadows cast by candlelight during one of these wakes, the murmured prayers mingling with laughter and tears. The wake is both a mirror and a mask, reflecting societal fears while concealing the individual's complex humanity. It is a reminder that history's margins often hold stories of both suffering and strength. Historians continued to explore how such rituals affected women's identities and choices. Some argue that the wake imposed unbearable social pressure, while others see it as a cultural resource that women could draw upon. The reality likely varies across regions and individuals, underscoring the need to understand history's nuances. So tonight, as you drift into the quiet spaces of sleep, remember the wakes of the unwed not only as somber customs, but as moments where the community's fears, hopes, and contradictions converged. Within these rituals, women found both constraint and a flicker of power, a reminder that even in social exclusion, there are stories of resilience waiting to be told. You glide into the crowded, bustling scene of the parish dance, where every clack of wooden shoes on stone floors and every swell of fiddle strings carries more than just music. It carries the hopes, fears, and intricate social negotiations of a tight-knit community. The dance card, a seemingly simple list of partners and dances, functions as both a shield and a weapon in this delicate game of courtship. For 19th century Irish women, especially those eyeing a leap day proposal, the dance card was a powerful social tool. Its carefully planned entries and omissions spoke volumes about attraction, availability, and social standing. In a world where direct conversation between young men and women was often limited, the dance card's subtle cues became a coded language, shaping the possibilities for connection and, ultimately, marriage. Picture a young woman, her cheeks flushed from the heat of the crowded hall, clutching her dance card tightly, eyes scanning the room for the glance of a favored partner. Each dance she accepts is a public statement, a carefully weighed signal of interest or discretion. Conversely, refusing a dance or leaving a space blank could send equally potent messages, interpreted by observant neighbors and kin. The dance card allowed women to navigate a societal expectations while exerting a degree of control over their romantic futures. It was a battlefield of desire cloaked in the elegance of tradition. These cards were often meticulously planned in advance, with family elders or matchmakers advising young women on whom to accept or avoid. The stakes were high. Accepting a dance with the wrong person could spark gossip or jeopardize future prospects, while skillfully managing one's dance card could open doors to favorable matches. For Leap Day proposers, the dance card was a rehearsal ground for boldness, a way to gauge interest and signal intentions subtly before taking the rare step of formal proposal. Historians still debate the extent to which dance cards empowered women or reinforced patriarchal control. Some view them as empowering, providing a socially sanctioned means for women to exercise choice in a constrained environment. Others argue they perpetuated rigid social hierarchies and surveillance, limiting genuine freedom. Either way, the dance card was a critical element in the choreography of courtship. A quirky detail is the inclusion of extras or unofficial dances, sometimes slipped in last minute as spontaneous invitations or as tests of a suitor's interest. These impromptu dances allowed for moments of personal connection beyond the strictures of the official card. For women considering Leap Day proposals, such moments could be invaluable opportunities to deepen rapport and assess compatibility. The parish dance itself was a microcosm of rural society, blending celebration with social regulation. The music, often lively reels or jigs, energized the space, while the social codes governing behavior kept the proceedings orderly. Women wore their best dresses and pinned flowers in their hair, signaling readiness and respectability. Men, meanwhile, displayed manners and dancing skill, both essential for attracting attention and approval. The dance floor's layout and the sequence of dances created natural opportunities for interaction and observation. Couples moved in circles or lines, their steps synchronized with the music and the community's expectations. Within this rhythm, subtle gestures, a touch, a glance, a smile became meaningful exchanges. The dance card orchestrated these moments, structuring social interaction within accepted norms. For Leap Day proposals, the parish dance was more than entertainment. It was a strategic arena. Women watched for signs of interest from particular men and used their dance cards to create or deny opportunities. They might accept a dance from a man they wished to propose to, signaling readiness, or tactfully avoid others to prevent misunderstandings. The dance card thus became a vital tool in the silent negotiation of intentions. You might imagine the nervous excitement as a woman hands her dance card to a favored suitor, her pulse quickening with each accepted dance. Each step taken together is a step closer to a possible proposal, especially on Leap Day, when tradition permits the bold reversal of roles. The dance becomes a metaphor for the courtship dance of society itself, complex, ritualized, and full of unspoken rules. The dance card's importance extended beyond the evening's events. It was often preserved as a keepsake, a tangible memory of youthful hopes and social connections. Some cards were decorated or inscribed with notes, reflecting personal significance. These artifacts remind us that courtship was as much about social memory as it was about immediate interaction. Historians continue to explore how the dance card fit within the broader network of social rituals, including fairs, wakes, and communal meals. Together, these events created a web of opportunities and constraints that shaped marriage patterns. Leap Day proposals, with their unique permission for women to initiate, fit neatly into this web, relying on the foundations laid by more routine social occasions. The dance card also illustrates the interplay of public and private in courtship. While dances were public and observed, the emotions and intentions behind them were deeply personal. Managing this tension required skill and courage, especially for women navigating the Leap Day tradition. Their mastery of this subtle social language enabled them to seize rare moments of agency within a restrictive world. So tonight, as the music fades into the background of your own thoughts, picture the parish dance, the whirl of skirts, the steady beat of fiddles, and the careful marking of dance cards as a stage where social norms and personal desires entwined. Within this dance, Leap Day proposals found their rhythm, allowing women a brief but powerful moment to lead. You wander through the lively market crosses of Lisdoonvarna and Telltown, where the air is thick with the mingling scents of damp earth, livestock, baked bread, and fresh hopes. These bustling fairs were more than simple exchanges of goods. They were the throbbing hearts of rural Irish social life, vibrant crossroads where economic necessity met human connection. For women eyeing marriage, these fairs offered rare chances to mingle beyond the watchful gaze of families and neighbors. Here, deals were brokered with sheep, whispered promises, and furtive glances, all under the booming cries of market vendors and the rhythmic beat of distant drums. Love, in this chaotic setting, was a commodity interwoven with commerce, and the leap day proposal tradition found fertile ground among the sheep pens and stalls. Picture a young woman named Eileen, weaving through the crowd, her eyes scanning faces both familiar and new. She clutches a small token of ribbon, a handkerchief embroidered with her initials ready to signal interest or offer as a silent proposal. The market cross was her stage, where the ordinary became extraordinary, and social scripts could bend just enough to allow bold moves. Among the calls of traders and the clatter of hooves, she finds moments of quiet connection amid the noise, each encounter a step toward a possible future. These fairs were, at once, economic bazaars and social festivals. Livestock auctions sat beside folk music and dance. Barter exchanged hands alongside courtship. The price of a good sheep could influence a family's fortunes, just as the approval of a matchmaker or elder could determine a young woman's prospects. In this intermingling of wealth and desire, leap day proposals were not anomalies but parts of a larger social fabric that blurred the lines between business and romance. Historians still argue about the extent to which these fairs functioned as courtship arenas versus purely commercial events. Some emphasize their role in fostering social networks and marital alliances, while others caution against romanticizing the practical, often harsh realities of rural life. Yet there is no doubt that the market crosses were key venues where the dance of proposal, acceptance, and negotiation played out visibly and audibly. A quirky detail is the role of sheep not merely as livestock, but as social currency. In some regions, gifting a sheep was tantamount to a proposal or betrothal promise, a tangible pledge of economic stability. Women proposing on leap day might use such gifts symbolically, reinforcing their seriousness and readiness to enter marriage with a partner capable of sustaining a household. This intertwining of agricultural wealth and romantic commitment underscores how deeply economic factors shaped relationships. Market fairs also provided a rare space where social classes mingled more fluidly than usual. While families often maintained strict boundaries at home, the necessity of commerce and celebration brought together neighbors, distant relatives, and strangers. For women, this openness meant opportunities to meet potential suitors beyond their immediate social circles, a critical advantage in areas where family alliances often dictated marriage choices. The noise and bustle of these fairs also created cover for subtle communication. A glance exchanged over a pile of wool, a whispered word amid the crowd, or the discreet passing of a note or token could set the wheels of courtship turning. Leap day proposals were often preceded by such signals, allowing women to test a man's interest before making the rare formal request. This gradual build-up made proposals more acceptable and less shocking to the community. You might smile imagining a young woman slipping a ribbon into the hand of a favored man, while a fiddler plays a lively tune nearby. The ribbon, simple, yet charged with meaning, speaks volumes amid the clamor of the market. For her, it is a bold step, a delicate negotiation made possible by tradition and the chaotic energy of the fair. The market crosses were also centers of gossip and reputation management. Stories of successful proposals, refusals, and courtship mishaps spread quickly through the crowds and beyond. A woman's prospects could rise or fall based on the whispers heard at these gatherings, making social skill and reputation as valuable as livestock or goods. Leap day proposals carried their own cachet here, celebrated or scrutinized depending on circumstances. Historians examined these fairs not only for their economic impact, but for their role in shaping social norms and personal relationships. They were crucibles where traditions like the leap day proposal could flourish, supported by the community's collective memory and expectations. The fairs offered a rhythm to rural life that combined work, play, and social negotiation. The interplay of commerce and courtship at the market cross reflects the intertwined nature of survival and love in rural Ireland. For women, proposing marriage was not just a matter of emotion, but a strategic act embedded in the broader dance of social and economic life. Leap Day provided a sanctioned moment for this act to be made public, a rare exception in a world otherwise governed by strict gender roles. As you rest tonight, picture the market cross alive with voices, colors, and hopes, a place where futures were quietly shaped amid the cries of vendors and the shuffle of hooves. Within this vibrant chaos, Leap Day proposals found a stage, a chance for women to leap forward and claim the lives they sought. You step into the world of the Irish widow, a figure both marked by loss and gifted with a peculiar kind of freedom, a woman whose social position, while fraught with grief, granted her economic shrewdness and a boldness in courtship that younger women often lacked. In 19th century Ireland, widows occupied a unique space in the marriage market, no longer bound by the immediate constraints of parental control or youthful inexperience. They could leverage their knowledge, resources, and social networks to make calculated choices about remarriage. These women often navigated the customs around Leap Day proposals with a confidence born of life's harsh lessons, using the tradition not merely to find companionship, but to secure economic stability and maintain influence within their communities. Imagine a widow named Bridget, who has managed the family farm after her husband's death. Her hands weathered but steady. She understands the value of land, livestock, and alliances better than most. When Leap Day approaches, Bridget does not shy away from proposing. Instead, she approaches it as a strategic move, weighing potential partners not only for affection but for their ability to contribute to or sustain her household. Widows like Bridget were often respected for their experience and independence, which, paradoxically, made them desirable matches despite social biases favoring youth. Widows occupied a liminal social space, neither quite the young maiden nor the fully established matriarch. This ambiguity allowed them some latitude in courtship practices. Leap Day proposals from widows were less likely to be viewed as scandalous and more as practical decisions. Communities often recognized the necessity of these unions for economic survival and social cohesion. The widow's proposal carried a weight of seriousness and respect that could override some of the stigma attached to female initiation. Historians still debate the degree to which widowhood empowered women, or reinforced their dependence. Some argue that widows had significant control over property and could negotiate marriage terms favorably, while others point to legal and social constraints that limited their autonomy. What is clear is that widows played a vital role in maintaining family estates and local economies, and their remarriage choices were closely watched and often carefully managed. A quirky detail of widowhood's influence is the tradition of the widow's cap, a distinctive headdress signaling a woman's status. This cap marked her both as a figure of respect and as someone with experience in matters of household management and courtship. The widow's appearance often carried messages to potential suitors about her availability and seriousness, subtly shaping the social dance of Leap Day proposals. Widows were also known for their shrewd negotiation skills. Having lived through the complexities of marriage, loss, and property management, they approached proposals with pragmatism. They could demand better dowries, favorable living arrangements, or assurances of partnership. This negotiation was not merely economic, but also social, as widows sought to protect their families' legacies and maintain their standing. The social networks of widows were often extensive, including younger relatives, friends, and former in-laws. These connections provided widows with information, support, and influence that could be leveraged in courtship. Leap Day proposals made by widows were sometimes facilitated by these networks, with matchmakers and family members playing active roles in arranging suitable matches. You might picture Bridget hosting a modest gathering at her home, gauging the interest of a potential suitor with a steady gaze and quiet questions. Her proposal on Leap Day is a declaration not only of desire, but of authority, a clear statement that she's a woman who knows her worth and is ready to build a new partnership on her terms. This confidence set widows apart from younger women navigating more constrained social expectations. The widow's role also highlights the intersection of gender, age, and power in rural Ireland. While youth was prized in brides, experience was valued in widows. This dynamic created a complex hierarchy of desirability and influence. Leap Day proposals from widows challenged simplistic notions of female passivity and showed how women could adapt traditions to their changing life circumstances. Some widows used Leap Day proposals to reinforce family alliances, marrying within extended kin networks to preserve land and resources. Others sought partners from outside their communities, bringing new blood and connections. The strategic nature of these decisions underscores the multifaceted role widows played in sustaining rural Irish society. Historians continue to explore how widowhood shaped women's economic and social agency, especially in relation to marriage customs. Widows' experiences challenge monolithic views of 19th century Irish women as uniformly powerless, revealing instead a spectrum of agency influenced by age, status, and personal circumstance. So tonight, as you close your eyes, think of Bridget and women like her weathered hands steady at the market cross, wise eyes scanning the dance floor, hearts ready to leap forward. In their stories, the Leap Day proposal tradition finds a powerful expression of resilience and savvy, where loss transforms into renewed possibility and where women claim space in the social dance on their own terms. You cross the vast Atlantic, tracing the letters penned by Irish emigrants to family and lovers left behind, where the act of proposing marriage took on new and daring forms across oceans. In the 19th century, waves of Irish men and women set sail for America, driven by famine, hope, or adventure. But the ties that bound them to home remained strong and complex. Letters became lifelines, vessels carrying not just news, but emotions, promises, and sometimes proposals themselves. Women on both sides of the sea adapted Leap Day traditions to this new, uncertain world, using ink and daring to bridge distance and social upheaval. Proposals made through letters, imbued with a longing and strategy, revealed a boldness that transcended geography and tradition, shaping new narratives of love and survival. Imagine a young woman named Fiona, living in County Clare, clutching a carefully folded letter from her fiancé, Thomas, who has crossed the ocean seeking work in New York. The letter carries a proposal words of commitment and hope, yet its arrival is fraught with uncertainty. Fiona's response, penned with trembling hands, may itself be a Leap Day proposal, a written request for marriage, daring in its directness, and a plea for certainty amid the upheaval. Letters like these transformed the Leap Day tradition, allowing women to initiate proposals even when separated by thousands of miles and the vast unknown of emigration. These transatlantic proposals were shaped by new realities. The traditional community oversight present in Irish villages was replaced by the anonymity and distance of immigrant life. Women and men had to navigate courtship with fewer social supports and more precarious economic conditions. Letters became the medium through which hopes were kindled and futures negotiated. Leap Day gave women a symbolic right to propose, but the act had to be translated into words carried on fragile paper, sometimes delayed by months or lost in transit. Historians still debate how common Leap Day proposals were among the Irish diaspora, and to what extent women exercised this right in letter writing. Some argue that the tradition persisted strongly as a cultural touchstone, offering continuity amid displacement. Others suggest that practical concerns and shifting social structures in America diminished its practice. Regardless, letters remain invaluable windows into the emotional lives of immigrants, revealing a rich tapestry of desire, fear, and resilience. A quirky detail involves the coded language used in correspondence. Women often employed phrases and symbols understood only by the recipient. Flowers mentioned in letters might indicate affection, while specific biblical verses conveyed promises or warnings. Leap Day proposals made by letter writers sometimes incorporated these codes, allowing women to propose marriage subtly, balancing hope with caution. Letters were not merely personal communications, but also instruments of negotiation. Women could use written proposals to set conditions, request assurances, or express concerns about economic stability and character. These written exchanges mirrored the complex dance of courtship back home, adapted to the challenges of distance and uncertainty. Leap Day proposals through letters became acts of courage, transforming private desire into public commitment across borders. The postal system, though slow and unreliable, created a new social space for courtship. Communities formed around shared letters and news, linking dispersed families. Women who proposed by letter often relied on networks of friends and relatives to ensure their messages were delivered and understood. This communal involvement added layers of support and risk, as letters could be intercepted or misread, with consequences for reputation. You might picture Fiona reading and rereading Thomas's letter by candlelight, weighing each word, crafting her reply with care, The act of proposing by letter demanded patience, eloquence, and resolve. It was a leap of faith as much as a leap of tradition, a bridging of worlds both physical and emotional. The tradition of leap day proposals through letters also intersected with broader immigrant experiences. Many Irish women faced pressure to marry quickly to secure their place in new communities, while men often wrestled with instability and hardship. Letters became forums where these tensions played out, with proposals carrying the weight of survival and belonging. Historians continue to explore how Irish immigrants adapted courtship customs in the New World, balancing old traditions with new challenges. Leap day proposals by letter exemplify this dynamic, showing how culture evolves and endures through innovation and courage. So tonight, as you drift off, imagine the quiet strength of women like Fiona, who crossed oceans with pens and paper as their weapons and shields. In their letters, leap day proposals become timeless acts of hope, bridging distance and defying limits, reminding us that love and agency can find a voice even across the vastest seas. You find yourself at the crossroads at dusk, where ancient stones meet the fading light, and the air is thick with stories whispered for centuries. Crossroads in Irish folklore have long been liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds, moments suspended between choice and fate. Here, at these mystical intersections, proposals took on symbolic weight. Women used the ritual of crossing these paths, often adorned with claddagh rings or ribbons tied to hawthorn trees, to convey messages of love, commitment, and intent. The leap day proposal tradition wove itself into these customs, blending tangible gestures with spiritual significance, where the act of choosing a path became a metaphor for choosing a life partner. The crossroads, the ring, the ribbon, all were threads in the rich tapestry of Irish courtship lore. Imagine a young woman named Aisling standing at the intersection of two ancient roads, her fingers clutching a claddagh ring, a symbol of love, loyalty, and friendship, waiting for her chosen suitor to arrive. The hawthorn tree nearby, often called the fairy tree, stands adorned with ribbons left by hopeful lovers, each knot tied with a wish or promise. At this sacred space, Aisling prepares to make her leap day proposal, blending tradition, nature, and personal courage. The crossroads become a stage where the natural and supernatural converge, offering a potent backdrop for acts of courtship. The claddagh ring itself carries layers of meaning. Traditionally given as a token of engagement or friendship, its design, a heart held by two hands topped with a crown, embodies values central to marriage. Wearing or presenting this ring during a proposal was a way to communicate commitment and sincerity without words. For women proposing on Leap Day, the ring was both a personal gift and a public symbol, signaling their readiness to enter into a bond governed by love and loyalty. Ribbons tied to hawthorn trees represent another rich tradition. The hawthorn, sacred in Celtic mythology, was believed to be inhabited by fairies and spirits. Tying ribbons to its branches was a way to leave wishes or prayers, seeking blessings for love and protection. For women on Leap Day, this act was a ritual imbued with hope and magic, a plea to forces beyond human control. The fluttering ribbons in the breeze became a visual testament to the dreams and desires of countless hopeful hearts. Historians still debate the origins and meanings of these customs, recognizing their blend of pagan and Christian elements. Some suggest the crossroads rituals predate Christianity, rooted in Celtic beliefs about liminal spaces and the power of choice. Others see them as folk adaptations of Christian symbolism. Regardless, these practices persisted into the 19th century, deeply embedded in rural Irish life and courtship. The act of proposing at a crossroads carried profound symbolism. Choosing to meet, exchange tokens, or make a promise at such a site was to acknowledge the gravity of decision and destiny. The crossroads were places of transition, where the future was uncertain but shaped by the choices made in that moment. Leap Day proposals performed here were not just social gestures, but sacred acts, connecting human love to the rhythms of the natural and spiritual world. You might envision Aisling slipping the claddagh ring onto her suitor's finger as twilight descends. The sky painted in hues of purple and gold, the ribbons tied around the hawthorn swayed gently, carrying whispered wishes into the evening air. This scene is both intimate and timeless, a fusion of personal courage and ancient tradition that breathes life into the Leap Day proposal. The use of crossroads and symbolic tokens also served practical social functions. These rituals provided discreet ways for couples to communicate intentions, especially in communities where direct interaction between unmarried men and women was limited. Meeting at a crossroads allowed for privacy while maintaining a connection to communal beliefs and values. The rituals gave form and meaning to what might otherwise be risky or taboo interactions. Claddagh rings themselves became family heirlooms, passed down through generations, embedding personal stories within the broader cultural narrative. Their presence at Leap Day proposals reinforced continuity and belonging, linking individual choices to the legacy of Irish identity and love. Historians explore how these symbolic practices interacted with more formal customs of courtship and marriage, recognizing their role in creating a layered, multifaceted experience. The crossroads, rings, and ribbons offered women ways to express agency and hope within a framework that honored both tradition and personal desire. The spiritual dimension of these rituals also speaks to the resilience of Irish folk culture amid social and economic upheaval in the 19th century. In a time marked by famine, emigration, and change, such customs provided a sense of stability and connection. Leap Day proposals performed at crossroads thus carried not only social but emotional and spiritual significance. As you settle into the quiet of the night, picture the crossroads bathed in moonlight, the Claddagh ring gleaming softly, and the ribbons whispering stories of love and longing. These symbols remind us that in the delicate dance of courtship, the choice of path is as sacred as the promise made. Leap Day proposals, entwined with these rituals, offer a glimpse into a world where love is both earthly and enchanted. You slip quietly into the hushed confession shared behind closed doors, where priests, bound by duty but swayed by human empathy, sometimes looked away as young couples forged trial marriages away from prying eyes. In 19th century Ireland, the strictures of the church governed every aspect of social life, especially marriage. Yet, beneath the surface of rigid doctrine, a hidden world flourished, one where clergy, aware of the social and economic pressures faced by their parishioners, occasionally tolerated unofficial unions. These trial marriages allowed couples to live together, test their compatibility, and, in some cases, prepare for Leap Day proposals or formal betrothals. The tacit acceptance of such arrangements reveals the tension between idealized religious expectations and the pragmatic realities of rural life, casting Leap Day proposals in a new light as part of a broader spectrum of social negotiations around love and commitment. Imagine a small, candlelit barn on a chilly evening, where a young couple shares a modest meal, their whispered hopes mingling with the scent of hay and peat smoke. Their union, unofficial but deeply felt, exists in a liminal space recognized by some but denied by others. The priest who ministers in the nearby village knows of such arrangements but turns a blind eye, understanding that for many, economic necessity and social survival outweigh canonical rules. In this clandestine world, Leap Day proposals become not only acts of courage, but also steps toward legitimizing partnerships already in existence. The phenomenon of trial marriages challenges simplistic notions of 19th century Irish morality. While the church condemned cohabitation outside wedlock, local realities often compelled a more flexible approach. Priests, caught between doctrine and compassion, sometimes acted as silent arbiters, balancing spiritual authority with pastoral care. Their reluctance to enforce strict penalties against couples living together reflects an acknowledgement of the complexities surrounding marriage, especially in impoverished or dispersed communities. Historians still debate the prevalence and acceptance of these unofficial unions. Some argue they were widespread but hidden beneath layers of silence and social discretion, while others see them as isolated exceptions. Regardless, the existence of trial marriages highlights the gap between formal religious prescriptions and lived social experience. Leap Day proposals fit within this context as moments where women could formalize or challenge these informal bonds, seeking recognition and stability. A quirky detail involves the use of barns, outbuildings, or secluded spots for these trial unions, places both practical and symbolic. The barn, associated with labor and sustenance, became a space of intimacy and transition. Couples might share meals, prayers, and plans there, weaving a domestic life apart from official sanction. Leap Day proposals could follow these periods of cohabitation, transforming secrecy into social legitimacy. This dynamic reveals the tension between public morality and private realities. While communities publicly upheld church teachings, They often quietly accommodated deviations when social welfare demanded it. Such accommodations demonstrate the adaptability of social systems and the ways individuals navigated constraints to meet personal needs. For women proposing on Leap Day, the possibility of trial marriage offered both opportunity and risk. Proposing could mean formalizing a relationship already in existence, or daring to transform an uncertain bond into a recognized commitment. The decision to propose was laden with social and emotional weight, balancing hope against potential scandal. The Church's tacit tolerance also suggests the importance of community mediation in marriage practices. Priests, elders, and matchmakers all played roles in negotiating these gray areas, guiding couples through transitions that were neither fully accepted nor wholly condemned. Leap Day proposals became part of this mediated social landscape, where tradition, religion, and pragmatism intersected. You might imagine the quiet relief of a couple whose Leap Day proposal is accepted after months of trial, their union moving from shadow to light. The formal recognition offered a measure of security and belonging, both spiritual and social. For many, this transition was crucial in establishing family legitimacy and community standing. Historians continue to explore how these unofficial unions and Leap Day proposals reflect broader patterns of social change, resistance, and adaptation. They challenge narratives of rigid Victorian morality, revealing instead a complex tapestry of negotiation and survival. The leap year tradition, situated within this context, emerges as a culturally sanctioned moment of female agency and social transition. As you drift towards sleep, picture the quiet sanctuaries where couples forged their bonds away from judgment, where priests looked away not from indifference but from compassion, and where Leap Day proposals bridge the divide between informal love and formal commitment. This hidden world reminds us that human connection often transcends rules, finding expression in moments of courage and hope. You find yourself drawn into the tangled web of folk magic and love knots, where superstition, ritual, and hope entwine in the quest for affection and security. In 19th century Ireland, love was as much a matter of charms and spells as it was of social custom, especially for women navigating the uncertain waters of courtship and Leap Day proposals. Folk magic offered a way to influence fate when human agency felt limited, with rituals involving hawthorn trees, knot tying, and enchanted objects believed to bind hearts and wills. These practices, often performed in secret or at liminal times, infused the Leap Day tradition with a mystical dimension, where desire and destiny met in acts of whispered enchantment. Imagine a young woman named Mered, standing beneath a hawthorn tree at twilight, hands busy tying a ribbon in a complex knot, while murmuring an ancient incantation. The hawthorn, sacred and feared as a dwelling for fairies, was a focal point for love magic. Tying ribbons to its branches was thought to send wishes aloft to the spirit world. Each knot tied was a promise, a plea, or a spell cast in hope that the desired suitor's heart would be swayed. Leap Day, with its rare allowance for women to propose, became a powerful time for such magic, blending tradition with the supernatural in a potent dance of faith and longing. Love knots, intricate bindings of thread or ribbon, carried symbolic weight in folk belief. Tying a knot represented the binding of two souls, a physical manifestation of emotional connection. These knots were sometimes concealed in clothing, woven into hair, or left at sacred sites, carrying intentions unseen but deeply felt. For women preparing Leap Day proposals, crafting and tying love knots was both a spiritual practice and a tangible expression of commitment and hope. Historians still debate the extent to which these magical practices influenced real-world courtship outcomes. Some see them as symbolic acts that reinforced personal resolve and community bonds, while others consider them vital tools in a world where women's direct power was limited. Regardless, folk magic added a layer of meaning and comfort to the uncertainties of love and marriage. A quirky detail involves the fear and respect surrounding hawthorn trees. These fairy trees were places of both blessing and danger. Disturbing a hawthorn could bring misfortune, while honoring it with ribbons and offerings invited protection. Leap Day proposals performed near such trees were acts of reverence and risk, invoking otherworldly aid while navigating earthly challenges. The intertwining of magic and courtship reflects a broader Irish worldview where the natural and supernatural coexist. Love was not merely a social contract, but a cosmic force to be courted and commanded through ritual. Leap day proposals, rare chances to invert social norms, became moments ripe for a magical intervention, where women sought to tip fate in their favor. You might picture Mered slipping a small charm, a woven heart, or a lucky stone into her pocket before approaching her suitor. This talisman, charged with intention, serves as both protection and promise, a physical link to the hopes carried in her heart. The blending of folk magic with social custom created a rich, layered experience of courtship. These magical practices also provided emotional solace and empowerment. In a world where women's choices were circumscribed, rituals like knot tying offered a sense of control and participation in shaping destiny. The acts themselves became sources of strength, community identity, and personal meaning. Historians continue to explore how folk magic influenced social behaviors and gender relations, recognizing its role in both reflecting and shaping cultural values. Leap day proposals situated within this magical context demonstrate the multifaceted nature of female agency, where spiritual belief and social action intersect. The use of magic in courtship also underscores the tension between official religion and folk tradition. While the church often condemned such practices as superstition, they persisted robustly in rural life, embedded in daily routines and special occasions alike. Leap Day, with its sanctioned inversion of gender roles, offered a particularly fertile moment for these ancient beliefs to flourish. As you settle tonight, imagine the flickering shadows cast by a small fire near a hawthorn tree, the whispered prayers, and the intricate knots tied with hope and determination. These images remind us that love's power transcends logic and law. Weaving through belief, ritual, and courage, Leap Day proposals, touched by magic, invite us into a world where the heart's desires reach beyond the seen and into the realm of mystery. You slip behind the veils of scandal sheets and secret vows, into the shadowy undercurrent of 19th century Irish society, where gossip and clandestine marriages intertwined in a dance as delicate and dangerous as any Leap Day proposal. The tight-knit rural communities that held these traditions were rife with stories whispered behind hands and closed doors, tales of bold women who defied convention, love triangles that simmered beneath polite smiles, and secret weddings that took place far from the watchful eyes of families and clergy. Leap Day proposals, with their rare allowance for female initiation, sometimes sparked gossip columns in local newspapers or became the talk of parish gatherings, exposing private passions to public scrutiny. These stories reveal a complex social world where reputation was currency, and love was often hidden beneath layers of secrecy and social performance. Imagine a village inn where a fire crackles low and patrons lean close to exchange the latest news. There, a woman's Leap Day proposal, rejected or accepted, might become the source of whispered intrigue, fueling debates about propriety, courage, and ambition. Some women, emboldened by the tradition, made secret vows or even entered into unofficial marriages, taking risks that could both secure their futures and jeopardize their reputations. The stakes were high, and the consequences could ripple through families and communities. Local gossip columns, early versions of scandal sheets, often chronicled such events with a mix of titillation and moralizing. Reporters and letter writers recounted tales of young women who boldly proposed marriage, men who shirked their duties, and couples whose secret unions shocked or delighted the parish. These narratives shaped public perceptions of Leap Day proposals, casting them alternately as acts of bravery or transgression. The attention could bring fame or infamy, and women had to navigate this perilous landscape carefully. Historians still debate how much influence gossip had on social behavior, and whether it served to police or empower women's actions. Some see the scrutiny as a means of enforcing conformity, while others argue that it provided a platform for women to assert their presence and challenge norms. Leap Day proposals, situated within this fraught terrain, were both a cause and consequence of community storytelling. A quirky detail is the use of code names or euphemisms in gossip columns to discuss sensitive matters without naming individuals directly. Women might be referred to as the bold lass from County Clare or the young widow with a secret, preserving a veneer of discretion while fueling curiosity. These coded tales added a layer of mystique to Leap Day proposals and allowed communities to engage in social critique with a touch of humor. Secret vows and marriages often took place in remote chapels, barns, or even private homes to avoid public censure. These unions, sometimes facilitated by sympathetic clergy or matchmakers, provided couples with a way to legitimize their relationship on their own terms. Leap day proposals could be the first step towards such arrangements, a way for women to claim agency in a tightly controlled social environment. The existence of these clandestine unions highlights the tensions between public morality and private desire. While formal marriage required family approval and church sanction, secret marriages allowed individuals to circumvent barriers, often at great personal risk. Leap day proposals, with their element of role reversal, intersected with these hidden practices, offering women a sanctioned moment to push against boundaries. You might picture a young woman whispering her vow to a trusted friend or a sympathetic priest, the flicker of candlelight casting shadows that conceal more than they reveal. These secret moments were acts of defiance and hope, fraught with danger but imbued with the power to reshape lives. The impact of scandal sheets and secret marriages extended beyond individuals to affect family reputations and social alliances. A woman's leap day proposal, accepted or rejected, could alter her family's standing, influence marriage markets, and even impact inheritance disputes. Communities negotiated these changes through conversation, rumor, and, when necessary, intervention. Historians continued to explore how these social narratives shape gender roles, marriage customs, and community cohesion. Leap day proposals emerge as flashpoints in these processes, moments where personal initiative collided with communal expectations, producing stories that resonate through history. As you sink into sleep tonight, imagine the flickering candlelight of whispered secrets, the rustle of gowns in hidden rooms, and the murmur of voices sharing tales both cautionary and celebratory. These stories remind us that love's path is rarely straightforward, often winding through shadows and whispers, daring leaps and quiet vows. You step into the charged atmosphere of 1896, the year that witnessed one of the last and most infamous leap day proposal attempts, a moment that would reverberate through Irish society and mark the beginning of the tradition's fading into history. In a rapidly changing world, where industrialization, urbanization, and shifting social mores challenged old customs, the daring proposal made on that rare February 29th became a viral sensation long before viral was a word capturing imaginations and igniting debates across villages and cities alike. This final leap was not just a personal act of courage, but a cultural flashpoint, where centuries of tradition collided with modern sensibilities, ultimately leading to the gradual end of the sanctioned day when women could boldly ask for a man's hand in marriage. Imagine a crisp February evening in Dublin, where a young woman named Kathleen, spirited and determined, prepares to propose to a man of standing. Defying the expectations of her family and community, news of her intentions spread swiftly through newspapers and salons, stirring fascination and scandal in equal measure. Her proposal, though rooted in the venerable leap day custom, is met with shock and resistance in a society increasingly attuned to Victorian ideals of propriety and gender roles. The public spectacle that ensues through letters to editors, caricatures in popular prints, and spirited conversations in tea houses captures the tension between tradition and change, between female agency and social constraint. The events of 1896 underscore the precarious position of leap day proposals in a world hurtling toward modernity. While the custom had persisted for centuries, the social fabric that supported it was fraying. Urbanization brought new forms of social interaction. Education expanded ideas about gender and rights, and the church tightened its influence over marriage norms. Kathleen's proposal, bold and public, challenged these shifting currents, becoming a symbol of the struggles women faced in asserting their desires amid changing but still restrictive frameworks. Historians debate the precise impact of this last leap day proposal. Some see it as a catalyst accelerating the tradition's decline, exposing the anachronism of a custom that allowed women a single sanctioned day of agency, but left them powerless the rest of the time. Others interpret it as a final flourish of cultural identity, a last gasp of rural Ireland's intimate social rituals before they were swept aside by modern life. Whatever the interpretation, 1896 marks a turning point, the moment when the leap day proposal became a relic rather than a living practice. A quirky and poignant detail from this period involves the circulation of satirical poems and illustrations that mock Kathleen's proposal and the idea itself. These works reflected broader societal anxieties about women stepping outside prescribed roles and the tension between progress and tradition. Yet beneath the satire lay an acknowledgement of the courage required to challenge norms, revealing ambivalence about female agency and social change. The public reaction to Kathleen's proposal also highlights the role of the press and emerging mass media in shaping social discourse. Newspapers and pamphlets spread news and opinion rapidly, amplifying debates and influencing public opinion. Leap day proposals, once confined to village gossip and local custom, became topics of national conversation, subject to scrutiny and critique in unprecedented ways. This shift in the public sphere contributed to the tradition's demise. As leap day proposals moved from private ritual to public spectacle, their social function changed. The balance of humor, respect, and subtlety that had sustained them eroded, replaced by controversy and misunderstanding. The once charming exception to social rules became a target for criticism and dismissal. You might picture Kathleen reading harsh headlines by candlelight, her heart pounding not only with hope but with the weight of public judgment. Her bravery in proposing, while admirable, placed her at the center of a cultural storm, emblematic of the tensions confronting women seeking autonomy in a changing world. The end of Leap Day proposals did not mean the end of women's desires for agency and choice. Instead, it marked a transformation in how these desires were expressed and pursued. New avenues, education, suffrage movements, and evolving social norms began to open, shifting the landscape of gender relations. Leap Day's fading was a quiet prelude to louder demands for equality. Historians recognize 1896 as both an end and a beginning, a farewell to a tradition steeped in folklore and community, and a step toward modern conceptions of courtship and marriage. Kathleen's story, preserved in print and memory, embodies this transitional moment, a symbol of courage facing an uncertain future. As you draw the blankets close tonight, imagine the fading light of that last Leap Day proposal, the mix of hope, defiance, and melancholy that filled the air. In this moment, the old world and the new touched briefly, leaving a legacy of stories that whisper of leaps taken and paths chosen. The tradition may have ended, but the spirit of Leap Day proposals lives on in the quiet rebellions and bold hearts that continue to shape love's journey. Word count 1200. You've reached the final section. Now here's the requested 300-word wind down to close the script. As your eyes grow heavy and the quiet hum of the night deepens, let the stories of Leap Day proposals settle softly around you like a gentle mist, across fields and villages, through whispered legends and secret knots. Women once dared to leap boldly, stepping into a moment carved out for courage, choice, and hope. Though time has moved on and the tradition has faded, its echoes remind us that agency can bloom even in the most constrained spaces, that love finds a way through ritual, magic, and whispered vows. Rest with the knowledge that the women who stood at crossroads, tied love knots, and dared to propose carried the weight of futures not yet written, their leaps rippling quietly through history. Now, as you drift toward dreams, imagine the flicker of candlelight on a cold February night, the soft rustle of ribbons on hawthorn trees, and the steady rhythm of hopeful hearts beating in time with ancient customs. The courage it took to leap forward, to ask, and to love against the odds, is a timeless gift, one that continues to inspire the bold in every age. Let this story ease you into sleep, a lullaby of resilience and quiet power whispered across the centuries.